Actually stopped at Glenrowan, and I wasn't going to do this, but I noticed this place I've never seen before, this new sort of exhibition here. Oh, look at this, Ned Street. Of course, I'm talking about when Ned Kelly made his final stand at Glenrowan, where he said, I've had it with running, let's have it out, let's end this thing here and now. And he took on the Victorian police, the troopers. But yeah, I haven't seen this vintage hall before. It wasn't here last time I came, but look what they got. Look at these guys. Brilliant, eh? Steve, he was the American. Of course, Ned. Dan, his brother. And Joe Burren, who was his deputy. Brilliant, eh? Look at this. I'll go in and have a quick look. Stop recording. Stop recording. Right. Hi again. I'm in the historic little place. I call it a place. I don't think it has any buildings of any significance at all, called Greta. No, I was calling it Greta, but apparently I'm told if the locals heard me say that, they'd correct me and say it's Greta, which is the spiritual homeland of Ned Kelly. I'm just trying to pour a tea while I talk to you. So he was born here with his mother and his sister and his brothers, and they were a big Irish family that were always in trouble with the police, and the cops didn't like them and they didn't like the cops. So I'd stopped in Glenrowan. I got a couple of fridge magnets. I wasn't intending to. There's quite a few people turning up. I'm at the cemetery. I'm here for the grave of a man that died in the Boer War called William Petty. But I thought I'd just tell you before I go into the cemetery. I'd say all these people, well, they reburied Ned Kelly about 10 years ago. They exhumed him from what they thought were the remains of Pentridge Prison, and they buried him here at Greta without a headstone, because they didn't want people coming and making a big deal out of Ned Kelly. But anyway, I'm going to tell you why I like Ned Kelly, and I'm not a Ned Kelly worshipper. I just think he was a heroic man, and he had a lot of guts. So I'm going to tell you why. So over there in Glenrowan is the remains of, well, actually there is no remains, but the site where the Glenrowan Inn was. Now, the Glenrowan Inn was where they made their last stand. It was the only time that the Kelly gang wore that armour, which proved to be impractical. And to me, it's one of the most historic sites in Australia, but for most of the times I've ever been there, I didn't go this time to have a look where the inn was. It was just a vacant lot, which had a sign saying this is a site of the Glenrowan Inn, and next to it was a vacant block for sale. It was like having the Alamo just on a vacant block, you know. But anyway, on the night that the Kelly gang rode into Glenrowan, and they took the town hostage, and they held them all in the Glenrowan Inn. And the night dragged on. They were going to derail the train coming up from Melbourne with the police on it, but the train was late. They all got drunk, and the whole thing went to shit. So in the morning, it became evident that they were surrounded by the police, and the police were pouring in fire into the inn. The inn had no walls. They were just ironbark, walls, so the bullets went straight through. It was a massacre. A lot of those patrons in that Glenrowan Inn were shot and killed by the police. And then a fire started, of course. So at some stage in the morning, Ned Kelly actually left. Now, whether his comrades, Dan, Steve Hart, and his side man, Joe Byrne, were still alive, I'm not sure. Whether they even put on the armour while they were in the hotel, once again, I'm not sure. But Ned Kelly had opportunity to slip out, and what he was going to do, they never really knew, but he was supposedly meeting other sympathisers in Glenrowan, so he slipped out of the inn without the police seeing him, and it was at that stage that he put on his armour. And this is why I admire the man. At that stage he could have turned around, he could have got on a horse and he could have fled Glenrowan, but he turned around and he did the difficult thing. He came back for his mates in that inn and he put on the armour, and it was it was dawn and foggy and cold in Glenrowan, and they saw him coming out of the mist like an apparition, like a spectre, and he was banging his revolver onto his iron helmet, calling them dogs. Come on, you dogs! And goading and taunting the cops. Well, I mean, all you had to do was shoot him in the legs, which is what they did with a shotgun, and it brought him down. And that's where they captured Ned Kelly, trying to make his way back to the inn to see his friends. And that's why I admire the man, that he had the bravery and the guts to go back and to think about his mates. So that's all I'm going to say about Ned Kelly. We're going to go into the Greta cemetery and we might listen to our letters from the front while I'm walking around there looking for the grave of Matthew Petty. Why he's buried here, or why there's a memorial to him here, I've no idea. I doubt they would have brought the body back. But let's go and have a look. There he is, as soon as we get here. So erected by public subscription to the memory of Private William Petty, who died in Pretoria, South Africa, while serving his Queen and country, December the 27th, 1900, age 23. A good comrade and a brave soldier. So we found it as soon as we walked in, but the reason why he's here is he's it must be his parents, John Bates Petty, outlived his son by 10 years. Mary Petty, she died in 1918. It looks like there was something here for William that's been broken off. We'll walk around, we'll look at a few other headstones and maybe listen to some letters from the front. What do you think? Letters from the front. Trooper A. Healy, Castlemaine leader, the 1st of June 1901. In another column will be found a letter from South Africa written to his mother, Mrs. Trembath of Barker Street, by Trooper A. Healy of the New Zealanders. The writer was born here and spent his boyhood and youthful days in the town. He is brother to Mr. C. Healy, a sorter at the local post office. Quote, in the woods, 3rd of April. We have had a fairly good time up to now, but they have started giving us half rations, and I expect we shall have to go to bed hungry. Worse luck. It's pitiful to see the natives here. Some of them cut a hole in the bottom of a sack, and then the sack makes a suit of clothes for one. Scores of children may be seen without a stitch of clothing at all. At the railway station a long way back, we got 13 little boys to sing, and the effect was splendid. Somebody had evidently trained them, for they sang tenor and bass lovely. They sang the Hallelujah chorus for us, during which about 6 of them would sing a line and the others would then join in, taking different parts. 2 of the boys, not more than 6 years of age, also entertained the visitors with a capital rendition of Tamara Boom Die. I was always led to believe that South Africa was a barren place, but I am of different opinion now, for I don't think I've seen better oranges or lemons than those growing here. There are thousands of miles of that flat country here, which makes splendid grazing land. It seems a shame to see the boys knocking the trees about so as to get the fruit, but the destruction of the property is a sort of compensation for the manner in which the Boers got on to us at the beginning of the war. Easter Monday, we have reached Petersburg at last. We marched right into town before a shot was fired. There were 2 Boers, pluckier than the rest, who had fled. As our advance guard came in, a Boer picked off an officer, shooting him dead. Another officer rushed up to his assistance when the Boer fired again and shot him in the groin. The second officer's orderly came onto the scene when he was shot instantly. A volley was fired at the Boer as he rode off without effect, and the men gave chase. When they were about to overhaul the Boer, he halted, threw up his arms and pleaded for mercy. The foremost trooper, however, bayoneted him, and at the same time about 30 bullets struck him, so he was a terrible sight to look at. Easter Tuesday, our 2 officers and orderly were buried yesterday afternoon with military honours. It seems strange on Sundays here, as everything goes on as usual, and it's difficult to tell what day it is. Last Sunday we marched about 20 miles, and on the previous Sunday we were looting farmhouses, taking prisoners and doing a little shooting at warm baths. We will probably remain here a few days to rest the horses. The day before we arrived at Petersburg, the Boers held a meeting and decided to hold the town, and next morning only 2 of them remained to defend it. One was taken prisoner, the other was shot. Private J. Dallaston, Kyneton Guardian, 6th of June 1901, West Australian contingent. The following letter has been received by Mr. Thomas Dallaston of Barfold from his brother, Private J. G. Dallaston, who went to South Africa with the West Australian 5th contingent and may prove of interest to his friends. Quote, May the 9th, 1901, to tell you the news since I left WA would fill a book. I've not seen any actual battles yet, but we're in the front over 5 weeks now and must have captured about 80 Boers and thousands of sheep and cattle and about 40 bullock wagons. It is not fighting, only mustering up cattle, wagons, sheep, men and so forth. We had 1 man shot dead and 1 wounded by a few snipers. Still, we are liable to have a scrap at any time, as there is a Boer commando with 300 men just a few miles away watching us. Out of the 200 men that came over, only 60 were out on the field yesterday. About 50 have their horses either dead or not fit to ride, and the remainder are left behind with sickness. We keep leaving them behind and don't hear how they get on. We hear no news. Sometimes we leave the camp at 2 o'clock in the morning, but 5 o'clock is the general time. Sometimes we do 18 hours a day. We had 3 days spell in the month, but are going into Middelburg tomorrow and are going to have a few days spell, I hear. We journeyed thousands of miles by train as soon as we landed at Durban. We took a train for Pretoria through Johannesburg and Machadorp. Then we got orders for Liedenburg, and I don't know where we did not go. We travelled night and day in open coal trucks, eating and sleeping in them. We never had an accident all the time, but just before and since we've had several trains have been upset. The Boers sneak up at night and post a charge of dynamite under a culvert or somewhere and blow the line, but they generally run an armoured train in front of the army train. The trains travel in bands, 9 or 10, about a mile apart, so when the line is broken they all stop and the men fix it up. It's a marvellous country, this. Any amount of grass, water, rocks and natives. I had a look at the famous town of Ladysmith. I'm not surprised at the war lasting, and I think it will last for some time yet. You cannot believe how hard it is to get anything you want. I had no paper, envelopes or stamps. Private A. Newton of the Kyneton Guardian, 28th of June, 1901. Among the Victorians severely wounded in the recent disaster at Wilmansrust was Private Alfred John Newton, the eldest son of Mr. and Mrs. W. Newton of Boggy Creek, near Kyneton, and nephew of Mr. and Mrs. H. Burnell of Simpson Street, Kyneton. He was 22 years of age and previous to going to the war had been engaged at straw pressing work at Mr. Watson's Highbank Hill farm. After being rejected on applying for inclusion in the 4th Contingent, the Imperial Bushmen, and also as regarded the 5th Contingent, 1st Division, he was amongst the 500 selected as the 2nd Division of the 5th Contingent. His cousin, Miss Louise Burnell, received a letter from him only last week. It bore the date 1st of May 1901, but did not state from whence it was written. The writer stated that he had not been well during the past week. It was rather a rough work, but he was pretty well colonised. He'd been in 5 engagements up to the time of writing, and they were expecting at any time to meet De Wet, Botha and Steyn all together, and so anticipated a terrible fight, which he thought would pretty well finish the war. He had been nearly shot on one occasion. He was riding along the bottom of a big kopje scouting when he rode within 300 yards of the Boers, who all fired on him. Bullets whistled all around him, and one went through the shoulder of his tunic and into his horse's nose. Needless to say, he put spurs to his horse and got out of range as soon as possible. But it puts a queer feeling through a fellow that first time he gets into action, he remarks. He had, however, got quite used to it now and didn't take any notice. About 100 were absent from the regiment, sick, wounded or missing. The commanding officer thinks a terrible lot of Australians, and the 5th Contingent were said to be the best that had come from Australia. They were given all the roughest and most dangerous work to do, but he would not have missed his chance of going over, although he didn't think he would stop there and would be quite satisfied if he got through all right when his 12 months are up, to get back to Victoria. He had seen many men over there that he knew. It's terrible to see the lads when they get shot. After a battle there are some men wounded and some dead. The place is nothing but a mass of graves. There are graves everywhere you go a look, and the horses and mules are lying dead in all directions. The smells were enough to give all the soldiers the fever. He was scribbling his letter on his saddle whilst his horse was having a feed. They might be fired on at any instant, so had to be watchful, as they might be called on at any moment. The letter concluded with the jocular remark that the writer's friend should see him with his whiskers, as he had not shaved since he had been over there, and a request to be kindly remembered to all at home and friends in Kyneton. Private Whitworth of the Kyneton Guardian, the 18th of July 1901, from the front. Mr. G. H. Pook of Lauriston has received a letter from Private A.C. Whitworth, who will be remembered by Lauriston district residents. The letter is dated June the 7th from Kleinpan, British Bechuanaland, South Africa, 832 miles from Cape Town, where the writer was fighting at the front. He had previously been in the Town Guard, Cape Town, but has joined the Duke of Edinburgh's own volunteer rifles. Private Whitworth enjoyed the reputation of being an excellent shot while in the Lauriston district, and he mentions his fondness of the gun as having been the inducement to volunteer for the front. He remarks that there is plenty of big game there, and that it is all right being on active service except for the uncertainty re the game being up with oneself at any time. From being a left-shoulder shooter, he has changed to the right with encouraging results. They have lived rather roughly at times, and Lord Kitchener has issued orders that on no account are any of them to surrender. The Boers are always stealing about on looting expeditions, and on every opportunity murder the unarmed natives, who are excellent scouts. His time will be up on the 6th of October, and he does not think he will have any more fighting after that, at least for a time. Sleeping in the trenches is not altogether a pleasant experience, but even with a stone for a pillow, when one is dead, tired sleep comes as quickly as the explosion of a Nordenfelt or pom-pom. When you awake, aroused by a dig from the rifle butt of the sentry, you have to feel if you have a nose or ears, so the cold is much keener than in Victoria. one can jump on the ice of water streams without breaking it, and he has seen icicles 7 and 8 feet long hanging from the water tanks at the railway station.